Chapter 11. The Stormed Palace. The storm broke at midnight. Lightning split the sky, thunder rattled the marble towers, and rain lashed the palace like claws. Sarian woke to the sound of steel. He wasn't alone. A shadow detached itself from the corner of his chamber. A masked assassin, dagger glinting in the lightning flash. Sarian rolled from the bed, snatching the short sword he'd stolen weeks ago. His shoulder screamed from its half-healed wound, but adrenaline drowned the pain. The assassin lunged. Steel clashed in the dark. Sarian barely parried, sparks flying as the blades screeched together. He shoved hard, kicking the man back. Another figure leapt through the balcony, rain streaming from his cloak. 2 against 1. Sarian's pulse roared. He fought like the alley brawler he once had been before royalty chained him. Dirty, fast, desperate. He ducked, slashed, drew blood, but for every strike another blow landed. His ribs burned. His hands slipped slick with rain and crimson. One assassin caught him off guard, slamming him against the wall, dagger pressed to his throat. The door burst open. Kalen stormed in, a storm within the storm, drenched in rain, sword gleaming with lightning. His roar shook the chamber. "Get away from him!" He was fury unleashed, cutting through one assassin with a single brutal strike. Blood sprayed the stone. The second turned, but Kalen's blade was already at his throat. The man fell, silence thudded in its wake, broken only by the storm outside. Kalen turned, eyes locking on Sarian. He froze. Sarian was bleeding, gasping, his sword slipping from his hand as he staggered against the wall, but his gaze was steady, defiant, even in pain. "I didn't need you," Sarian rasped, though his knees buckled beneath him. Kalen caught him before he hit the floor. His arms were iron, his chest heaving. "You damn fool," he whispered, voice break. "You could have died, you." Sarian's bloody hand fisted in his shirt. "So what? That's what you wanted, isn't it? For me to stay away, to stop bleeding for you?" Kalen's breath shuddered. His forehead pressed to Sarian's, rain dripping between them. "Don't ever say that. Don't ever." His voice cracked, raw. "If you had died tonight, I wouldn't have survived it." Sarian's eyes widened, his throat tightening. For the first time, Kalen's mask was gone. No steel, no control. Just fear. Just truth. The storm outside raged, but inside, the silence between them was louder. Sarian's grip loosened on Kalen's shirt. His voice, hoarse, barely carried. "Then stop pushing me away." Kalen closed his eyes, the weight of those words shattering what little walls he had left. And in the wreckage of the storm, he knew he could never let Sarian go. Chapter 12. The Bond of Flames. The storm faded by dawn, but its chaos lingered in the palace halls. Guards swept through corridors, servants whispered of traitors, and blood was scrubbed from marble floors. But Sarian and Kalen did not sleep. They sat in silence in their chamber, Sarian's wound freshly bandaged, Kalen still damp from the rain. Neither spoke for hours. The storm outside had passed, but between them, the storm only swelled. Finally, Sarian broke it. "You said," his voice was rough, hesitant, "you said if I died, you wouldn't survive it." Kalen's golden eyes lifted, raw, unguarded. "I meant it." Silence thudded. Sarian's throat tightened. "Then why keep pushing me away? Why keep treating me like I'm just a leash your father tied around your neck?" Kalen stood abruptly, pacing like a caged beast, his fists clenched at his sides. "Because that's what you were supposed to be." His voice cracked through the room. "A pawn, a symbol, a tool for peace. If I let myself want you," his chest heaved. "If I let myself need you, they'll destroy us both." Sarian rose, fury sparking in his veins. He stepped into Kalen's path, eyes blazing. "I'm not afraid of them. I've bled, I've fought, I've lost everything, and I'm still here. I'm not fragile. I don't need your protection. What I need," his voice broke, trembling, "what I need is for you to stop lying to yourself." Kalen froze. His breath was ragged, his control shattered. Slowly, he reached out, cupping Sarian's jaw with a trembling hand. "Your fire," he whispered, voice hoarse, "and God's help me, I burn for you." Sarian's heart slammed. His hand fisted in Kalen's cloak, dragging him down. Their lips crashed together, all fury and hunger and desperate need. The kiss was fire unleashed. Teeth, tongues, ragged gasps. Sarian shoved him back against the wall, climbing into his space, claiming with the same ferocity he fought on the battlefield. Kalen growled, spinning them, slamming Sarian against the stone instead, his mouth devouring down his throat. Hands tugged at fabric, ripping silk, armor, bandages, until there was nothing left but skin against skin, heat against heat. "Say it!" Kaelin panted against his ear, biting hard enough to draw a gasp. Say you're mine. Syrian's nails raked his back, leaving welts. His lips curved in a defiant smirk. Make me. Kaelin did. They crashed into the bed, sheets tangling around sweat-damp bodies. Every touch was a battle, every kiss a war. Syrian bit his shoulder hard enough to bruise. Kaelin dragged his mouth down Syrian's chest, leaving marks like brands. It was not gentle, it was not tender, it was raw, desperate, consuming. And yet, when Syrian cried out, Kaelin slowed. His hands softened, his lips gentled. He murmured against his skin, voice trembling with something dangerously close to worship. You're not my chain, he whispered. You're my choice. Syrian's chest ached, his throat closed, and when he finally surrendered, body and soul, it was not to chains, not to force, but to fire. The night burned until neither could tell where one ended and the other began. And when they finally collapsed, tangled in the wreckage of passion, Kaelin pressed a trembling kiss to Syrian's temple. Mine, he whispered again. Syrian's lips curved faintly, his eyes drifting shut. Yours. Chapter 13. The King's Fall. Morning light spilled through stained glass windows, painting the throne room in crimson and gold. The scent of incense lingered, heavy and suffocating. Kaelin stood tall before the council. Syrian stood at his side, head held high despite the whispers that slithered through the chamber. The conquered prince, the consort who ensnared the air. The king's voice thundered across the hall. Enough, this farce has gone on too long. The bond is a danger to the crown. Kaelin's jaw tightened. You arranged it. You demanded it. I demanded obedience, the king snapped, his jeweled fist slamming the throne's arm. Not affection, not love. You shamed this house with your weakness. Syrian's heart lurched. Love. The word hung like a blade in the air. Kaelin stepped forward, golden eyes blazing. If weakness is fighting for what I choose, then I will wear it proudly. Gasps rippled through the nobles. The king rose from the throne, robes dragging like blood across the marble. His gaze burned into Kaelin, then cut to Syrian with venom. You are nothing, he spat. A leash, a foreign whore dressed in silks. I should have had you executed the day you arrived. Syrian stiffened, but before he could answer, Kaelin's roar shook the chamber. Enough! The sound silenced the hall. Even the king faltered. Kaelin's hand gripped the hilt of his sword, his voice trembling with fury. If you ever threaten him again, if you ever so much as breathe against him, I will spill your blood on these stones, king or not. The chamber froze. No one breathed. The king's face turned ashen with rage. You would raise your blade against your own father? Kaelin's voice was steady, sharp as steel. I would raise it against any man who tried to take him from me. Syrian's chest ached, breath caught between terror and something deeper, hotter, unbearably raw. The king's lips curled in a snarl, but before he could speak, the High Chancellor's voice cut through, calm and calculating. The council has heard enough. The bond is sealed. The people whisper of it already. To break it now would fracture the realm. For the crown's survival, the union must remain. The king's fury echoed through the chamber, but even he could not overrule the council. Kaelin turned, his eyes finding Syrian's, blazing with a vow that needed no words. The throne room erupted into whispers, but Syrian heard nothing, only the thundering truth in Kaelin's gaze. I choose you. Chapter 14. The Coronation Vow. The bells of Varen tolled, deep and resonant, echoing across the capital like thunder. Black and gold banners rippled in the wind, the sigil of the new reign unfurling against the sky. The throne room glittered with torchlight, packed with nobles and emissaries from every corner of the realm. A crown of obsidian and gold rested on a velvet pillow before the altar. Kaelin knelt. The High Seer intoned the ancient words, but Syrian hardly heard them, his gaze fixed on Kaelin's broad shoulders, the scars visible even through the ceremonial armor. The steady strength of a man who had bled for every inch of power he now claimed. And soon, the crown touched his brow. Rise, Kaelin, king of Varen. The hall erupted in cheers and bows, but Kaelin did not rise to face them first. He turned to Syrian. Gasps rippled as Kaelin extended a hand, palm up, golden eyes blazing with defiance and devotion both. Stand with me, he said, voice carrying through the chamber. Not as my chain, not as my enemy, but as my consort, chosen by fire and by will. Syrian's breath caught. The entire court leaned forward, vultures hungry for scandal, for refusal. He should have hesitated. He should have remembered the chains, the humiliation, the blood. But instead, his hand lifted. Trembling, he placed it in Kaelin's. The hall erupted into chaos. Some voices cheering, others hissing, all whispering. But Kaelin only squeezed his hand, strong and steady. The High Seer's voice cut through. Then let it be so. The bond of peace becomes the bond of flame. The crown is shared, the vow eternal. Kaelin drew Sarian forward before the entire kingdom and pressed his lips to Sarian's knuckles. Not as a display, not as a weapon, but as a vow. Sarian's chest ached, his throat burned. For the first time, the chains felt like wings. The court could whisper, the king could reckon, the age, the world could crumble. But today, before gods and men, Sarian stood not as prisoner, but as king's beloved. Chapter 15. Chains transformed. The coronation feast stretched into the night, but Sarian barely tasted the wine, barely heard the songs. His mind was a blur of whispers and stares, of Kaelin's hand never once leaving his. When the last toast was given and the court dismissed, the new king led him away. Their chamber was quiet, lit only by golden candlelight. The rain-washed air smelled of roses drifting in from the gardens. Kaelin shut the door behind them. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was heavy with everything unsaid. Then Kaelin sank to one knee. Sarian froze. His heart lurched. Kaelin lifted his hand, pressing his lips softly to Sarian's skin. Not possessive, not demanding, reverent. "I once swore I wanted only your obedience," he said, voice low, steady. "But tonight I ask for something else. Not as your king, not as your captor, as your man." Sarian's throat tightened. He had dreamed of vengeance, of freedom, of fire, but never of this. The wolf kneeling before him, baring his heart. His hand trembled as he reached out, cupping Kaelin's jaw. "You're a fool," Sarian whispered. "But you're my fool." Kaelin rose in one smooth motion, capturing Sarian's lips in a kiss that was nothing like the ones before. It wasn't war, wasn't fire. It was devotion, slow and aching. They undressed each other with reverent hands, every touch an unspoken vow. Where once there had been bruises and battles, now there were caresses, soft as promises. On the bed, Kaelin's hands roamed Sarian's skin like scripture, mapping every scar, every tremor. His lips followed, leaving trails of warmth across collarbones, chest, stomach. Sarian arched into his touch, breath ragged. "You don't need to worship me." Kaelin's golden eyes burned into his. "I already do." Their bodies moved together, slow at first, then faster, heat rising until it was unbearable. But beneath every gasp, and cry, there was tenderness, a rhythm of trust. No chains, no threats, only choice. When Sarian finally shattered in Kaelin's arms, his cry muffled against his lover's shoulder, Kaelin held him as though he were the most precious thing in the world. And when Kaelin followed, trembling with release, he whispered against Sarian's hair, "You are my crown." Sarian's eyes stung, though no tears fell. His arms wrapped tighter around the man he had once sworn to hate. "And you are my freedom." They lay tangled long after the candles burned low, breaths slowing, hearts steadying in unison, and for the first time since chains had bound him, Sarian slept in peace. Chapter 16. Epilogue. Fire made flesh. Years later, the palace no longer felt like a cage. The banners of Varen and Altar hung side by side across the great hall, their colors twined. Peace had lasted longer than anyone dared hope, not from treaties or threats, but from the bond that had once been forged in chains. Sarian stood on the balcony overlooking the gardens. Children laughed below, royal wards from both kingdoms, training with wooden swords under the watchful eyes of guards. Their voices rang like music. Strong arms slid around his waist from behind, a kiss pressed to the curve of his neck. "Already planning the next war?" Kaelin teased, his voice older now, deeper, but still carrying that dangerous heat. Sarian leaned back into him with a soft snort. "You'd be lost without me sharpening your edge." Kaelin chuckled, nuzzling into his hair. "Lost? No. Hollow perhaps." His hand tightened, warm and steady. "You filled me with fire, Sarian. You still do." Sarian turned in his arms, facing him. Time had carved more lines into Kaelin's face, but his eyes were still molten gold, still the same man who had once been enemy, captor, husband, lover, and now partner. They kissed softly, nothing like the battles of their youth, but just as fierce in meaning. When they parted, Sarian whispered against his lips, We were forged in chains. Kalen smiled, the kind that belonged only to him, and remade in fire. Below, the bells of the city tolled, not in mourning, not in triumph, but in peace. And on the balcony, the two kings held each other, no longer bound by hatred, but by the choice they had made every day since, together.